Hello everyone! With Act 3 released a week ago, the final row of the artifact perks of Episode 1 had unlocked, and here's my thoughts of it. Before we start, I want you guys to know that I want to talk about them on their own performance at the current sandbox. If some of the perks have synergy between them, I'll talk about them as well. Starting with the first column, we have the classic weapons intrinsic champion stunning perks. Anti-barrier pulse rifle is definitely the highlight of this episode when paired with Outbreak Perfected or Graviton Lens. I think if you have seen any Solo Master or GM content, Outbreak is everywhere because it's an excellent primary weapon for both add clear or DPS on bosses. And the best part is, you can shoot it very far back away for a very safe damage environment and let the nanite do all the work for you. Also, Outbreak is a kinetic weapon, which means it can feel both light and dark energy on Transcendence while running Prismatic. With 5 self-grace fragments, you can get Transcendence super fast. The added anti-barrier capability just makes it even better in content where anti-barrier champions are present. And I don't know if you guys have noticed, there's a lot of anti-barrier in this episode's activity, so its usage has been skyrocketed. Graviton Lens is less appealing compared to Outbreak in terms of solo content, because it lacks on DPS against champions and bosses. But it is a great weapon for almost anything else because it is a beast on act clear with the buffs from Season of the Deep and the Final Shape launch. Not to mention, the new Heavy Burst archetype introduced in the Final Shape is one of the best primary weapons in the game as of right now. So giving them anti-barrier intrinsic is very OP. In conclusion, anti-barrier pulse rifle is very good in this episode, and I'm afraid that we won't get it in episode 2 with Revenant. Unstoppable Sidearm is next. With Rocket Sidearm being the best legendary weapon archetype in the game at the moment, this perk makes it even better by giving it the ability to stun Unstoppable and makes it on par with anti-barrier pulse rifle. For a normal sidearm, it is really not that great because of range, and I don't think you want to run into a champion on higher end content like Master or GM. But why are we even using it when there's 3 rocket sidearms in the game right now? The next one is Unstoppable Scout Rifle. I think we can skip this one, right? Scout needs to have another buff to take advantage of it. Back in Season of the Wish, the reason why Polarius Lens pops off is mostly because of all the solar artifact perks like Kindling Trigger, Flint Trigger, and Rays of Precision to make Ignition go absolutely out of control. Without all those mods, Polarius performs way worse, since a Rocket Sidearm is able to do the same thing but with much higher damage and better act clear. This is absolutely horrible in this episode. Overlord Hand Cannon is next. It is usually a great perk in older season, but it is another underwhelming intrinsic perk in this episode. Why? Because of Prismatic. It is so easy to stun Overlord with it to the point where Overlord weapons are kind of useless. 5 self-dominance with an Arc Grenade can stun them, or 3 classes of Transcendence Grenade can stun them. Some more specific ones like Hunter Ascension, Shuriken Melee, or Gateway Artist Stasis Turret build on Warlock can also stun them with ease. The only time that an Overlord Hand Cannon is usable is when you are not using Prismatic, or you are running a specific Prismatic build that cannot use Transcendence or Fast F Dominance. As of right now, Overlord Hand Cannons have taken its place by Prismatic. Things turns out to be better with anti-barrier Submachine Gun. It breaks the barrier's shield really fast when you are relatively close to it. Even at a not favorable distance, at least it can stop the health regeneration going. Since you can't break shields with abilities except some enhanced ones with exotic armor like Metaphordoxia, using a high damage weapon like Submachine Gun to stun anti-barrier is the only option you have, and I'm glad we have one of the best in this episode. I think the last time we had an anti-barrier sniper was almost 2 years ago in Season of the Plunder with the release of Arc 3.0, but with the introduction of Steel Hunt, they brought it back and it's pretty good. If a submachine gun excels at close distance, this one is similar to anti-barrier pulse rifle but much faster at long distance. It is pretty solid in this episode, and with nearly no ability to hit through the shield, we should appreciate any good anti-barrier intrinsic perks. Overload Auto Rifle is next. I think we have been waiting for any good Auto Rifle intrinsic perks since Koforstov's insane performance at the start of Act 1. But it suffers the same fate as Overlord Hand Cannon, which is that there are too many ways to stun Overlord on Prismatic at the moment, which makes it so much less appealing. Is it bad? Of course not, but it would be much better if it is anti-barrier or unstoppable. Onto the second column, Logic Reductor has longer duration and increased the Radiolaria pool damage by 5% against Vex. Since Radiolaria Transposer Origin Trait is one of the best PvE perks for Act Clear, it is a solid perk to choose for the longer duration. Next one is Overcharged Armory, which makes weapons from the Salvation's Edge raid. The Pelhard, Warlord's Green Dungeon, and first episode receive overcharge modifiers in certain activities. This is a very mediocre perk because it can't stack with overcharge modifiers within the activities itself. I want to talk about all three of the authorized mods together. These are absolutely awful. Because these cost reduction perks don't affect builds in any meaningful way, you can always get a minor or sometimes completely remove the stat mods to slot in these mods, so you can use other more impactful artifact perks. Saint's Inspiration can overflow up to 100% magazine capacity when refilled with Cast No Shadows. It is a very mediocre perk because its effect is so small that you won't notice because the base origin trait is already good enough. I think the only weapons that can benefit from this is the Neomarty's contribution Waveframe GL and Line in the Sand Linear Fusion Rifle. Winning Hand states that scoring kills or precision kills with dealer's choice weapon will trigger Solar Explosion. This is mostly an ag clear perk. As Ace of Spades counts as a dealer's choice weapon, they want to mimic Firefly on the Neo Pelhard weapons as well. It is honestly pretty solid if you can take advantage of it, but it is being overshadowed by Prismatic in terms of ag clear capability. Onto the third column, Elemental Siphons spawns Elemental Pickup with either a kinetic weapon or a super element matching weapon with 3 kills. This one is probably for non-prismatic subclasses which are also being overshadowed by Prismatic, so not good in this episode. Overload Sword is pretty good this season, especially with the introduction of Ergo Zoom on the energy slot. I think you guys have seen the Waveframe Arc Conductor Ergo shedding ass even at GM, and it only requires 1 hit to stun Overload champions. Creeping Chill is up next. Stasis weapon kill against slowed or frozen enemies will trigger a slowing burst that applies slow for 2 seconds. This is terrible because it requires a stasis weapon kill to trigger, and they also need to be slowed or frozen first. Let me ask you this, how many stasis weapons do you have in your PvE lore? I guess at most you only have 1 to 2 weapons and you don't use it that often. So what's the point of even having this perk? Press the Advantage is another bad perk. Stats on weapons don't matter unless you are a speedrunner. Feather Blast is a pretty niche perk that only works on some builds. It states that destroying Tango with a strand weapon will create an explosion at a much larger radius and deals increased damage. This is a very good perk to get Dark Transcendence energy very fast if you are able to generate Tangos frequently. My Metaphodoxia build has used this artifact perk as well to get Transcendence very fast. Incendiary rifle rounds work like the kindling trigger in last season, except it doesn't require Radiant to get Scorch stacks, and it is really good on Steel Hunt, Whisper of the Worm, or any good normal special sniper like Aikilo's SR. Overall, are solid artifact perks if you are able to hit your crit with a solar sniper. Sustain Fire is next. If you are a Kofostov or Choir of One enjoyer, this one is absolutely insane. Scoring 10 auto rifle hits will give resist times 3, which is a 40% DR for 6 seconds. This is the most brain dead perk ever because all you need to do is shoot the weapon, and the effect is so good that I think you should always pick this one if you're using an auto rifle. On the fourth column, Counter Energy is a solid perk to get ability energy back by just stunning the champion. Another pretty brain dead perk to get if you're running any content with champions and you want higher uptime on your abilities. But it is mostly for non-prismatic subclasses because you will have near infinite grenades and melees when you are transcendent with prismatic. Blade Stamina is mainly for Ergo Zoom because of its low reserve compared to heavy swords, and it is really good on the Waveframe Arc Conductor role. Other than that, this is a pretty lackluster perk that you should probably avoid unless you are using a normal sword to act clear. Void Hegemony grants 15 overshoot HP when killing weakened enemies on Void or Prismatic. In my opinion, this is very bad because of how weak Void Overshoot is. If you are playing on GM, a red bar can break it in a single hit. Unless they are going to buff it, I don't think you should ever pick this one unless you can get a lot of enemies weakened frequently for a lot of overshield. On the other hand, Radiant Orbs is very strong in this episode. Simply picking up an orb will grant Radiant for 10 seconds for that juicy 25% damage boost. Especially paired with Kofostov, you can shoot to loot to grab the orb for anti-barrier capability and 7 enhanced ricochet rounds with that 25% damage boost. It is very satisfying for act clear. Even without Kofostov, this is still a pretty brain dead perk to pick if you are running Prismatic or Solar, because if you can generate enough orbs, this perk is basically permanent. Galvanic Armor is next. This one is also super strong in this episode. Being amplified on Arc or Prismatic subclass will have 30% DR, which is pretty easy on all subclasses. Titan has Knockout, Hunter has Ascension and Culmination Blow, Warlock has Gateway Artist, which means this 30% DR is basically permanent if you are playing normal arc or prismatic builds. Solar Fulmination is next. It states that Ignition deal an additional damage instance in an increased radius. With Ember of Char on Solar, this perk can start chaining ignitions like crazy and clear a whole room with ease if you can make it happen. Also, it pairs well with Incendiary rifle rounds, so you can get a bigger ignition damage pretty often by just shooting your Solar Sniper rifle. It is also very good on Prismatic across all 3 classes as well. Gunpowder Gamble on Hunter can take advantage of this. Warlock's Helium Body also triggers ignition quite often, and Titan's Consecration is just ripping this perk off. Overall, it is a very strong artifact perk and can be very easily triggered. Targeting Autoloader is next. It can refill the magazine and increase damage based on how many auto rifle kills you get. It is another brain dead perk to pick if you are using an auto rifle. And it will be even stronger when you have Sustained Fire active as well. So you will have 40% DR, no reloads required, and some free damage boost by just shooting your weapon. I'm going to say again, but it pairs really well with the one and only Kvarstov. And it has some really good synergy with Choir of One as well. If you haven't tried using it, you are going to get amazed at how good they pair together. Onto the 5th column, Prismatic Transfer is pretty good on paper for a 20% damage increase for 10 seconds, but it suffers by not being able to stack with Radiant and other empowering buffs. So if you have a Warlock with Song of Flame, Well of Radiance, or even just a stable Orb generation with Radiant Orbs, this perk is completely useless. Argent Blade is next. This is the perk for the Salvation's Edge, Herald, and Crota encounter for DPS. I guess you have heard it a lot in LFG runs already, so I don't need to explain it. 15% increased sword damage and 100 charge rate for 5 seconds by consuming an armor charge, an excellent perk for sword DPS encounters. Expanding Abyss is next. This is another good to have perk for DPS because it makes the weaken effect stronger with void weapons. If you have Add Transit or Falling Guillotine for normal and sword DPS encounters, you have probably used it a lot if your team can weaken bosses with either Tractor Cannon, Twilight Arsenal Super on Titan, or Void and Transcendence Grenade on Warlock with Facet of Dominance. Shieldcrush can boost grenade, melee damage and recharge rate by having certain elemental buffs. It is a must-have perk if you are running Prismatic, because you can get most of the elemental buffs very easily for lower cooldown and higher damage on melee and grenade ability. Transference is a Prismatic only perk because you can get 10% increased grenade and melee damage while Transcendent, and it grants both light and dark energy per weapon kill while Transcendent, up to 50% when Transcendence ends. This is not as good as Shieldcrush because it only activates while Transcendent, and you generally want to spend your abilities to kill enemies while Transcendent, not by your weapon. So it is a really good perk if your Transcendence uptime is fairly high to take advantage of the increased grenade and melee damage. Sniper's Meditation is a very brain dead sniper rifle perk that you should pick if you are using snipers to do DPS like Steel Hunt or Whisper of the Worm. Because just like Sustained Fire and targeting Autoloader, this perk activates by just shooting your gun. I don't want to emphasize how good of a perk it is by doing basically nothing for free damage. It is usually paired with both Incendiary rifle rounds and Solar Fulmination to also trigger ignitions while shooting a Solar Sniper rifle with increased damage. Shock and Awe is the final artifact perk of this episode. It states that using Arc or Prismatic subclass will amplify, Arc kills will trigger a lightning burst to deal arc damage and jolt nearby targets. This perk is making the Broken Lights handshake build on Prismatic much stronger by giving it an AoE damage. But some good weapons can also take advantage of it, like Corrosion Heavy Burst Pulse Rifle, Non-Denouncement Bow, and exotic arc primary like Centrifuges. Just like Galvanic Armor, getting Amplify is super easy on all these classes, and by just getting arc kills to boost the arc clear capability is pretty brain dead, and you should pick it if you have the chance. After we have talked through the entire artifact perks list of this episode, here's my final thoughts of the first episode artifact perks. Overall, there's a lot of pretty strong artifact perks and it focuses more on enhancing Prismatic subclass, just like how each of the subclass 3.0 and Strand are released. For example, Radiant Orbs, Galvanic Armor, Shieldcrush, and Transference are all excellent Prismatic artifact perks. But the most surprising thing in this episode is the amount of weapon-related perks we get. Incendiary rifle rounds, Solar Fulmination, and Sniper's Meditation works extremely well together with Solar Sniper like Steel Hunt and Whisper of the Worm. Sustained Fire and Targeting Autoloader are excellent auto rifle perks for Choir of One and Kvarstov. Blade Stamina and Argent Blade for sword DPS and ammo reserve. Compared to the past season with weapon-related perks, I think they did a pretty good job at balancing things out so it doesn't become overpowered, but a good addition to it. Other than these good perks, we also have some terrible perks like the Authorized Mods, Creeping Shield, and Press the Advantage. In the current sandbox, they are not worth picking because we don't need it or the effects are too small. The weapon's intrinsic perks are mediocre. Unstoppable Scout and Overload Hand Cannon, Auto Rifle are completely overshadowed by Unstoppable Sidearm and Prismatic subclass. The anti-barrier poles, submachine gun, and sniper rifle are all very good, and they have a lot of great weapons to choose from. In the end, I'm very happy about what we've got in this episode, and I hope we'll have a similar lineup when Revenant comes out next month. If I have to give a rating, I will give it a solid 8 out of 10. Thank you guys for hearing me yapping. I will see you guys very soon. Bye bye.